Well, Pipe, I thought you grew up in Detroit.
Well, I did grow up in Detroit until the divorce in high school and all of that. So when I moved out here, it was in 1970. So we're going to explore the 1970s, early Missoula. I think we'll just call this the segment, That 70's Show. Copyright infringement violated. I went from Detroit, which was around 2 million people, to Missoula in 1970 was about 40,000 maybe. So to me, that was a really small town. I mean, when I first moved to Missoula, my mom had a place up on Westview Drive, and I remember the night I first got into Missoula, and we were up on Westview Drive, and I'm looking over the town, and I could see the old Go West Drive-In. And he still open, the drive-in was still there, Go West Drive-In, first mentioned. I looked up where the lights were at the Rattlesnake, and you could see it going up the Rattlesnake. I remember looking at my mom going, is that where the rest of Missoula is? No, it wasn't. I was looking at the whole thing. I remember I came from a town of 2 million. I acclimated like any other kid at that age would. Heck, it was 8th grade. I'm thinking just before high school when I'm starting to acclimate. The neighborhood up on Westview Drive, I had Chris Nord, who was a tennis coach at the University of Montana, a great athlete even back then, on one side of me, and on the other side, believe it or not, the coach of the Grizzlies, Jack Elway, and his son, John. Now, I played little Grizzly football. That's where I went in, met Mark McQuirk, Dan Kress. We played for 4Bs. I think we were Mark, what were we? The 4Bs Buzzards? I don't know, but I remember after every Saturday we'd play and we'd all go meet up at Chris Nord's house because he had a big yard there. Now, Chris was a year younger than me. Mark McQuirk was my year, and John Elway was like 3 years behind us. And we'd be out there playing. We're, all in a little Grizzly. And back then, John Elway was smoking us. Hated him. Big toothy grin, burning us for touchdowns. Dornblazer Field, where the Grizzlies played, was over by Hoagieville. Old rickety bleachers. And the UM Adams Center was a dirt and wood fort back then. Now the Harry Adams Fieldhouse. Just before high school, my mother moved down to Fairview Avenue, which was right across the street from Sentinel High School. That summer, Mike Painter, one of my friends growing up, was seems like he was the regulator to get everybody to sneak into the Spartan Pool on Bancroft. There is no Spartan Pool anymore. There'd be like 20, 30 kids in there at 1 o'clock in the morning, swimming, having the time of their lives. No problems. None. The neighborhood that I was living in at that time, when high school, I had kids everywhere. I had Glenda Noble across the street. I had Dennis Mitchell was a senior, and he was a biker, and he'd be like tearing up our neighborhood. Jim Schmidt was on the corner. Across the alley from me, I had the Jovitich clan. It's like 4 girls, 2 boys. There was Sandy, Ellen, Natalie. I'm at a loss for the rest of them. But, I knew there were 2 guys, and then Sandy was my age. I think Mark married Ellen, maybe, I think. That was the last time I talked to Mark. And, of course, next to Jovitich's was Don Boffman, which, my mom and dad told me to stay away from Don, and Don's parents told me to stay away from him, and, you know how that works in high school. The neighborhood rocked. It really did. It just was so cool, all these kids that I knew, High school started normal enough, I mean, playing football, doing the things that you do in your freshman year, wrestling. By spring, hell with that. We were throwing kegers, starting a party already because, that was the era I grew up. By my sophomore year in high school at Sentinel, 4B's in Holiday Village was the place to be. All the kids from Sentinel and from Hellgate that were, I don't know what you'd call us now. We were freaks back then. They call you, had your jocks, we were stoners, party people. We'd be up at 4B's drinking coffee and hanging out. And the place was packed, which gave wind to Missoula's very first, what are they called? The school resource officer?
Yeah.
We had one at the 4B's. Doug Chase was there every morning, keeping an eye on us. I remember one morning we were all in the bathroom. Doug walked in. We were, in the bathroom. Told us the place was reeks. Kicked us all out of 4B's for a day. When Doug wasn't there, Don Millhouse was. He was Doug's partner. I mean, we were really a cross between American Graffiti and Dazed and Confused. One day, my late sophomore year, we all got together, and by we, I mean Joe Whitaker, David Jensen, Don Boffman, Mike McKenzie, Rob Daly, Kevin Blackler, and Brian Blackler. They formed what was called the Kager Committee. These guys threw kegers every weekend. They threw into people's houses. Don't let these people know your parents were out of town. Next thing you know, there'd be a keg there. There were kegers up Patty Canyon, Miller Creek, out at Fort Fizzle, out Blue Mountain, you named it. Made some money. Oof-dee. If you remember Smoky Road at lunchtime, raise your hand. I've always been surprised growing up there in Missoula because I came from Detroit. It's the Motor City. It's Motown. I'm in Missoula, and there's more psychedelics than there were in Detroit. And I was always surprised at that. I mean, there was mescaline and acid everywhere. Yellow Flats, Yellow Sunshine, Pink Microdot, Mr. Natural Blotter. So the article came out in 1982 in the Rolling Stone magazine, which places Stanley Osley's chief chemist. Now, for those of you who don't know who Stanley Osley is, he was a chemist that made probably 500 million doses of acid. He was with Ken Kesey and Timothy Leary and the Merry Pranksters, and that's who Stanley Osley was. His chief chemist, and rumor has this now, and the Rolling Stone picked up on this, set up shop just outside of Lolo, Montana. And he would, and I quote, unleash the latest batch of acid on the college town that was about 15 miles away. That's Missoula. There's acid everywhere. Raise your hand if you remember the joint effort. In the early 70s, on this 70s show, the music scene in Missoula, Montana absolutely rocked the house. It was something like we've never seen again. ASUM programming and the field house got together and started throwing concerts. Andy, my junior year was 1974. I was in the class of 75. Go Spartans! The following bands showed up. This isn't even a fully exclusive list. This is just from January till around July. And we had the Beach Boys, Johnny Cash, Fleetwood Mac, Doobie Brothers, REO Speedwagon, Grateful Dead, All Right Dead, Bachman Turner Overdrive, Bob Seger, Sly and the Family Stone, Kiss, John Sebastian, who was the founder of Loving Spoonful, Blue Oyster Cult, and Steve Martin. I remember when Steve showed up, he had his white suit, bunny ears on. He's, I'm just a wild, He was fabulous. None of that even touches on the Aberday Kagers. The Aberday Kagers. This was something to behold, people. This was something. The Aberday Kagers ran from 1972 to 1979, were held to raise funds for the University of Montana Library. Started as a project in a sociology class on campus. Thousands and thousands of gallons of beer. Only. Free music for $6. Started around, I want to say about 11 in the morning and ran till it dark. Free beer. All they asked was no glass. So we big like pitchers, 5-gallon buckets. It was just something. They had bands like Jimmy Buffett, Hart, Elvin Bishop, Bonnie Raitt, Doug Kershaw, and of course the Mission Mountain Wood Band. It was at its height. They had 10,000 people at this place. They were rocking and rocking. Now, afterwards, you say, what did you do then? 10,000 people drove home drunk with the supervision of the Missoula County Sheriff Department and the Missoula Police Department. Because what could they do? Basically, you all got in a line, you drove home. They were at certain corners, make sure you didn't drive off into a field. You couldn't do that today. Andy, can you imagine 10,000 people drinking 1,000 cakes and all driving home?
And the cops helping them. That's nice.
Their local bands, the local music, was fabulous. Hell, I went to high school of Northern Freight, Mike Watson, Rod Harcel, to Bruin, and Dick Pleasant. All right, you guys. Local bands were everywhere in Missoula back in the early 70s. The early 70s rocked. You had bands like Comstock Load, Yellowstone, Northern Freight, Bailey Flyer, Pretty Face. They played everywhere. Played every bar, every festival. And speaking of festivals, raise your hand if you remember the Blackfoot Boogie. Southgate Mall. You guys all go shopping at the Southgate Mall. When I was a kid growing up in Missoula, it used to be a lumber yard. Yeah, the only light we could see there was a Circle K, where I think there's still something over there. You could see kind of through, but if you went in there in the afternoon or evening, weaving your way back in there and sneaking in there with some beer and it got dark, ho! The maze from hell. Damn near had to call the police to get us out of there a couple times. Yeah, we're drunk and we can't find our way out of the lumber yard. You got to remember, back in the early 70s, the drinking age was 18. So most of us were, legal age by juniors in high school and seniors for sure. So in the early 70s, everybody drank. Everybody smoked cigarettes. They're like smoking, drinking. We're smoking. We had a smoking area at Sentinel High School because we'd all like to smoke out front right there on South Avenue, and our parents would be driving by and we'd be like, why is my kid not in school? So they wanted us to all go, Instead we went down to 4Bs. Hell with the school. We did not have a drinking area designated anyway at Sentinel. We had a smoking area. Even the teachers had a smoking lounge. You'd go by there, there'd be this big fog. Everybody drank in high school. Everybody. School kids, our parents, the teachers, the principal, our friends, our neighbors, businessmen, even the dog drank.
Yo, man, the dog drank? You joking?
No, he was a bourbon guy. So by my junior year, we were tearing up the bars too. I mean, we had the catering committee, but we're old enough to get in the bar. Spring of my junior year, going into my senior year, I was 18, ready to go. Okay? We started out my drinking career at the library, which is now the Montana Club. That was in the Heidel House. Nickel beers, 50 cents pitchers, back when I was a junior. Bill McQuirk owned the place. I knew his son, Mark. I was hanging out with Steve Gleason, which was married into the family. I believe it was Steve's sister who married Bill. So when we were going into the library, Bill knew we weren't of age, but we were family. Back then, everybody, it didn't matter if you were in it. They had card bars back then. If you looked old enough, you got to drink. And in high school, by my junior, senior year, I had long hair, mustache, sideburns, big old mutton chops. We looked horrible. So we kind of grew up in the library. Nickel beers, 50 cents. He raised them to dime beers. Oh, man, we had a riot. Picketing out front. Right across the street from the library, the infamous Trading Post Saloon, which was also owned by Bill McQuirk. Back then, they still had Rawhide Night, which was an amateur stripper night. Hey, big shout out to Cinnamon. Those days, he started bringing in the bigger bands. On the weekends, started to expand the Trading Post Saloon. By the 80s, Bill McQuirk had some of the biggest bands. And we went and see Johnny Winter and Rick Derringer there. But that was the 80s, and that's not what we're talking about. The Trading Post Saloon could be a whole show by just itself. Number one meat market in the United States, voted by Playboy magazine sometime in the 70s. But in the early 70s, downtown was just crazy. The Park Hotel down on the old Circle Square had live music. Mission Mountain Wood Band played there all the time. But was the cool thing about the Park Hotel, not only was it a rock club, but they had the tap room that was off on the side of the Park Hotel. And they would have Drunkards Club every Tuesday night. Tuesday night, they wanted you to come out, and I think it was 25-cent beers, 50-cent highballs all night long. Now, the cool thing about or not cool thing about, depends on how you see this, to get to the tap room, you had to walk through the men's room and then come out into the tap room. So you'd be in there at the stall peeing, at the big trough, and girls would be like squeezing by, slapping you on the ass as they're going to the tap room. This would hurt somebody's feelings nowadays, wouldn't it?
Yeah, pretty so.
It's hard to believe, but that was just standard operating procedure at the Park Hotel. Other bands downtown rock too. There was the Monk Cave, Jekyll and Hyde, the Stocks, the I Don't Know Tavern, Luke's. You could literally bar hop from the Top Hat Bar out through the back door and into Chuck's or the Flame, and then down the American Club. You had the Turf, the Ambets. Out on the south side, you had 8-ball billiards. Now, rumor has it a guy rode a horse or a motorcycle through 8-ball billiards. That would just be whatever story you want to believe. We had the old Eddie's Club downtown where Lee Nye decided to photograph all the homeless and drinking people downtown and put their people on those photos on those horrible green walls on Eddie's Club. Free peanut night on Thursdays. There'd be peanuts this deep, shells or husk. The pictures are still up, and I guess it's at Charlie B's now. Heck, we even had Zeke Warren, the guy that owned the big barn that was out by the Trading Post. From noon to noon 30, Monday through Friday, Zeke gave away free beer. Free beer at noon. Has the Oxford, Oxford hasn't closed in like 800 years, right? It's been open forever. No 70's show. I mean, no early 70's show would be complete, if we're talking about Missoula, without the mention of Wayne Nance, the Missoula Mauler. Wayne was involved in 6 murders that we know of. And his first was Donna Pounds, 1974. That was my junior year. Wayne was just 1 year ahead of me. He was a senior that year. Okay? I really didn't know Wayne Nance all that well, but my road dog and best bro, Don Boffman, sure know him, and they did not get along. So, just because, Don was my road dog, I had to back his play. Him and Wayne got into it more than one occasion. And Don was bigger, quicker, got the best of them every time. All right, Don. Rest in peace, Don. I love you. I miss you all the time, brother. Kenny Pounds was Donna's son. Always would tell whoever would listen that Wayne killed his mom. Okay? Wayne Nance knew where the gun, nobody knew where the gun was. How did they finally catch Wayne Nance? Well, he was shot and killed during a home invasion of co-workers, residents. That was Doug and Chris Wells. And even though he was never formally charged after his death, they got a search warrant, went into his house. Heard he had a pretty good music collection. Trophies that placed him at 6 different murders, including Donna Pounds. So we always knew. He was just a weird duck, Andy. He's just a strange guy. So Andy's giving me the hurry up sign, which means I have to stop talking about growing up in a small town of Missoula. God, it was just fun reminiscing, telling people what it used to be like. So we're going to wrap this show up a little bit, get closed up on a Monday morning. Last week, Slapgate. Slap heard around the world. Will Smith announced last Friday that he was resigning from the Motion Picture Academy. I think that's a good move. When is it okay to commit assault in a public place, right? I'm sorry. As a former stand-up, I'm sorry. Comics of the old, like George Carlin, Dennis Leary in his early years, Jerry Seinfeld, Andrew Dice Clay, heck, even Lenny Bruce, okay? When you do stand-up, you pick targets. If you can't handle that, you don't need to go. It's not okay to hit people. I want to ask Will Smith, show me on the doll where Chris Rock hurt you. Words hurt? Really? That's where we've gone with this, is that words are now, society in general has absolutely lost their mind. As the war in Ukraine just grinds on, President Zelensky states that retreating Russian troops are booby-trapping and placing landmines and, as they pull back, which to me means they ain't coming back. They're like booking. I did hear that the Russian troops that are in Chernobyl, I heard now that they're glowing. Radiation. Ukraine hit a Russian oil depot in Russian territory. They're kind of like pushing the war back into Russia. Russia's steadily pulling troops out of there and into the southeast again. I think they got their butts kicked. I just do. I do. This did not go how Putin planned, and now it's time to worry because he's starting to look like a fool. He really is. I always thought that. Ukrainian soldiers, Ukrainian civilians, now that they're pulling out, the horror stories are coming to light. Rapes, executions, civilian-only targets, killing dogs. That's what the Russian troops are doing. Ex-United Nations prosecutor Carla Del Ponte has called for Putin's arrest for war crimes. I don't know if I disagree with her. I really don't. It's a horrible situation over there. 80% of the Russian people believe and think Putin's doing a good job. Tonight is the college basketball final game. My bracket is so busted. We have Kansas and North Carolina going at it at 7 o'clock on TBS. Coach K on Saturday, Mike Krzyzewski coached his final game. I was kind of hoping he'd win and kind of be into the finals and win, but that's, a perfect movie, and that's not the way things are. So tonight, 7 o'clock, TBS. I'm going with Kansas. Yeah, I'm going with Kansas. I think North Carolina is not as good as they look. But, plus their big guy's got a bum ankle now. So anyway, that it?
I think so. I think we covered it earlier.
That's it, everybody. Thanks for spending your Monday morning with me once again. I hope you enjoyed our 70's show and trip down growing up in a small town memory lane. Kiss your dogs, learn to duck and cover. You know the drill. Until next week, we are out of here, everybody.